Clearly, we have concerns around Brazil's credit profile. There are three main risks that we still remain concerned about. The first is really the strength and the sustainability of economic recovery. We at Fitch think that Brazil is expected to grow around 2.5% this year. This is not a spectacular economic recovery in the context of a very deep economic recession that Brazil has seen. And more importantly, perhaps the economic recovery prospects might be very closely tied to what happens on the fiscal side and what happens to the reform agenda. So if the reform agenda suffers, there can be somewhat of an unraveling of this positive dynamic around sentiment around Brazil. So that is something that we continue to have concerns around. The second area of concern really is the fiscal side. Clearly, if you look at the stock position in Brazil, that's obviously challenging. You've got debt burden of about 75% of GDP, which is well above around 50% of GDP for the BB median. And under no reasonable base case scenario do we expect debt to stabilize in the near term. Yes, there will be one-off factors that will slow the pace of accumulation in debt burden, such as the BNDES repayment, which will be very sizable this year, about 130 billion reais to the Treasury. But if you excluded that effect, and if you really look at the more medium-term picture, you're still seeing debt still on an upward march. On the flow side, things are also fairly challenging. We just got the fourth quarter results on public finances, so the full year picture for 2017, and Brazil just finished the year 2017 with about 8.5% of GDP in fiscal deficit. This is obviously more than double of what you see in the BB median, around 3.5% of GDP. So that clearly tells you the size of the fiscal hole. More importantly, going forward, we think that the spending side of things on the public finances, there are clear structural pressures there on Brazil, and we are not really seeing the reform agenda moving forward. In November, when we affirmed the rating, we still thought that there was a narrow window of opportunity left for the government to pass a Social Security reform. Clearly, by postponing that vote in December, clearly that was a negative signal. We obviously will remain focused in the next few weeks to see if we see a Social Security reform before the election cycle really kicks in high gear. So clearly a very challenging fiscal side of things. And finally, on the politics, politics is still very challenging. The early casualty of the election cycle might be the Social Security reform. So this is again something that we'll be looking at in the next couple of weeks. But also we are heading towards a fairly unpredictable election cycle. At this point in time, it's very difficult to see who the winners might be in this election cycle. And this will obviously become very important to think about, given that Brazil will be in a multi-year fiscal consolidation process. So clearly challenges abound at this point in time, and things have not moved that significantly to make us more positive about the rating.